Good day, brothers and sisters, and welcome once again to the CMI School of Christ. And we're going to go ahead and continue with our class, The Great Mercy of God. But before we continue, I just had an announcement, and forgive me if I've already made it. I can't remember if I have or if I haven't. But we have a website now, and you can find it. I think we can get it on the. Hopefully we can get it on the viewer right now, so it's appearing on the video. But you can go take a look at our website. It's crosseydned.com. That is crosseydned.com. And you can go check it out. Tell us what you think. You can make comments or just get in contact with us. But we do have that new website. I believe it was the Mind of the Lord. Brother Carson, he just kind of got the ball rolling, and I'm really thankful. And the timing was the Lord as well. So you guys can go check that out. We also have a Twitter account, and the Twitter address is @CrossEyedNed. So we're sending tweets. Every once in a while we try to get them out at least once a week. But hopefully when things just kind of settle down a little bit here with all that's going on, they'll be sent out more periodically, weekly, and possibly even more frequent than that. But I just wanted to make those mentions concerning those, about those two forms of outreach we have going. The website, we have a blog on there as well, and I've written a little bit for it, but not all that much. As I stated, we just don't have a lot of time to do more. So, and it's still not fully filled yet. We've got the majority of all the audio already up there, but we've got video, and the video is not there. Or excuse me, there is some video there, but there is a whole lot of video that is not. So we're going to be working on getting some video on there as well, or more video. When you go to the very first page, if you land on it, we've got our For Ustream channels right there on the very, I guess they call it the home page, I guess. But you can check out the most recent classes that are going on, 2 in English and 2 in Spanish, and praise God for that. And just right there, as you come to the home page, I wrote something up on the top part, and you can see it's kind of like a bluish color, and it's basically the heart for which everything is being done, everything that I do, and that is so that not only myself, but whosoever will, this may be of benefit, may be of help to serve the purpose of the Lord in their generation, in our generation. So I just really felt from the Lord that the internet is like the modern day Roman road. And just as during the time of the Romans and everything, they were using the roads. Different ones would use the roads for different purposes, but God used the road, made it available to spread His gospel. So that's what I believe the internet is today. It is a tool that God has made available to make known His eternal gospel of His Son. So I just wanted to mention those, make those announcements out there. A lot of this is all new to me, so praise God. We have to take steps to continue on following the Lord into the unknown sometimes, and ultimately every step we take towards the Lord is literally a step into the unknown, because it is not so much a step into beginning to do something or beginning to learn something new, but it is a step that is taken towards the Lord Jesus Christ himself, who is unknown unto us, unknown unto our soul, unknown unto our heart, until God the Father himself makes him known by revealing his very own Son in our heart. And at that moment, I just do want to say this, at that moment, our understanding doesn't increase or doesn't get larger or now we have understanding of the Lord. No. At that moment, it is the understanding of God that is now governing the heart. Whereas before Christ was revealed, was made known of the Father, before that moment, it was the understanding of man that was governing the heart. There is a very clear-cut division in that which is not Christ and that which is Christ. And I think that a lot of times, and we will see the contrast more and more as the Spirit of the Lord brings us on in knowing the Lord. But it is never our knowing. It is never our understanding. Because our knowing of Christ, our knowing, our understanding, our wisdom, our knowledge of Christ is ignorance. We never grow up in that sense. My mind is a carnal mind, the natural mind, the mind of man, the mind that all humanity has. All right? But I do know that Paul said this, but we have the mind of Christ. This happens at the moment of new birth. The mind of Christ is present at the moment of new birth because Christ himself is present in the soul. The thing is what is governing the heart and the soul? Is our ignorance of what we believe to be present governing our heart and our soul, which is complete darkness? Or is it Christ himself, the eternal change that has come unto our soul at the moment of new birth, which is not I, but Christ? Is this what governs our heart and soul or not? So, yes, every single born-again believer, the mind of Christ is present. The question is the mind of Christ governing or not? And the mind of Christ will only govern a heart and a soul if the heart and soul know him who is present. And the only way they know is by the knowing of God himself. God's knowing being made known in the heart and soul. And forgive me just the way the words of that sentence come out, but that's what it is. We are completely ignorant. God is not. God declares his knowledge in the person of his Son when he himself reveals his Son. At that moment, we are governed by God's knowledge, not man's knowledge. It will either be one or the other. It will be either the knowledge of God or the knowledge of man. The wisdom of God, the wisdom of man. The understanding of God, the understanding of man, and so forth. It goes on. So, I just wanted to, as I mentioned, just make those announcements, and may the Spirit of God continually prepare the ground of our heart to bring our heart in understanding by his work, to bring our heart in understanding from the understanding of man to the understanding of God. Always. So, I'll just continue on with our class. The great mercy of God. And our last class, in fact, our last couple of classes, we've just been looking at the heifer. We've been looking at the covenant between the pieces, and specifically we've been looking at we've begun to look at each of the animals that was cut in twain, that was cut in half. and we've basically just been looking at the heifer. And the last class that we had, we looked at some places where heifer came up, and then the word heifer with the rough valley, and that we actually looked at that term rough. We did some dictionary and concordance searches on that, and just seeing the contrast, the change from one to another. And see, as I stated earlier during our class, the eternal change comes to the soul at the moment of new birth. But just like with Abram, though in Acts, it says in Acts, Stephen said, the God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he dwelt in Haran. All right, there the eternal change came, all right, unto Abram. Why? Because God appeared. Excuse me. Now, whether that governs the heart of Abram or not, reality doesn't change. Okay? And we see that it doesn't govern the reality of God. God himself, who is present, does not fully govern as it ought. Okay? We can see this with Abram, with right here in Genesis chapter 15, where we looked at the cutting a covenant with blood. That basically is bringing to an end of everything that was before. And at this moment, when this particular covenant is cut with blood, from this moment onward, this is what governs now. Before, something else governed, but at this moment, with this particular covenant, the covenant between the pieces, this will now govern. So it's almost like a change of, I don't want to say, what am I thinking of? It's a change of government, I guess. All right? Abram was in covenant. Before, Abram was in covenant with the Amorites. And yet, we looked at passages in previous classes, how the Lord later says unto the children of Israel, when they go in to possess the land, possess the inheritance, he says, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. And yet we find here in Genesis 15, and I think it was like Genesis 13 previously, where Abram was in covenant with the Amorites. And yet the Lord brings that covenant to an end by establishing his covenant with Abram. And so one governing factor came to an end when a new governing factor appeared, when a new governing factor was made known. And that is always the way it is. That is always the order. Abram could not end his covenant with the Amorites. He couldn't. He was in covenant with them. He could not bring that to an end. All right? The Lord takes the initiative. The Lord steps in, brought that covenant to an end by establishing his very own covenant with Abram. By making his very own covenant known unto Abram, he brings everything that was before to an end. And see, the thing is how does he do this? How does he do this? How is Abram released from being in covenant with the inhabitants of the land? And I love this. And I think I mentioned it in our previous class, where Paul was talking about being joined to another. As long as the, forgive me, I know I'm going to paraphrase this, but as long as the one is joined to another and that other is alive, then they are not free to marry anyone else. They are in covenant. They're joined to that because of covenant. All right? But see, right here, with this covenant between the pieces, it is a beautiful, beautiful testimony of Jesus Christ and Him crucified, of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. When Paul says this, when one died for all died. So that it is seen that Abram is not the life here. Christ is the life that is present in the midst. And see, once again with Paul, he says concerning those that are joined, but if the spouse or whatever dies, then that person is free to marry whoever they want. And see, he's talking about being joined to the law versus being joined to Christ. I think it is. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but he's talking about being joined to one and not being able to be joined to another until this one dies. When that one dies, now you can be joined. You are free from the law to be joined to another. And see, that's what happened in the cross. I mean, look at it this way. Before we were born again, well, let's go even back further. Before Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross, all man was in condemnation, governed by death, under the condition and in the condition of death. Remember from the very get-go in the garden, the Lord says, do not partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because in that day that you eat of it, you will surely die. And at the moment they ate of it, their souls were found in a condition of death. In that condition, in the condition of death, life cannot be offered. And see, that's the thing. When Jesus of Nazareth, when he came, when he was walking on the earth, and in all the miracles that he did, and even when he raised Lazarus from the dead, life could not be offered in this respect. Life being Christ himself, the life of God, the eternal life, Christ himself could not be given yet, because all man were under the condition of death. Now, Jesus, when he goes to the cross, he says this, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. And then I think the very next verse says, and this he spake concerning what death he would die. So when he dies, he brings all that condition, all that humanity, all that man in to himself. And he is made sin. He himself, listen to this, he himself comes under the curse. He himself tastes death for every man. And in the cross, he declares, it is finished. He gives up the ghost. He is dead. And it is scriptural. You bury the dead. He is taken off of the cross. He is buried. And the third day, he is the resurrection and comes forth out of the grave. And see, here's the whole picture. When he died, he brought everything unto death. He brought the condition of death unto death. In a manner of speaking, he brought death to death. He brought death to an end. He brought that which completely governed the human race to an end in the cross. And he says this also. And the dead that hear my voice shall live. All right? So he brings all, before Jesus was crucified, nobody could be born again. Not one single person. But because of the death, burial, and resurrection, now he has made a way for all mankind. All right? So when he dies, he brings everything to death in himself. When he is buried, he brings everything unto burial in himself. Everything, because that's what Abram said. Let me buy a plot of land that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The dead must be buried out of sight. Okay? That which is dead must be buried out of sight. So he brings it all to death. He buries it all. And the third day, he comes forth as the living one. And now he offers life to whosoever will. Before, no man could receive life. No man could be offered life, lest they continue perpetually in that state of death. But because Christ brought that whole entire state, that whole entire condition unto death, now life may be offered. Life can be offered. Okay? Excuse me, I can't remember where I was or how I got on that. But there is the beautiful work of the cross. And it's not like a work like just something Jesus did, and the result is that this happened now. No. The finished work is Christ himself, the one who remains alive in the midst. Always. Let's see, do I have that? I can't remember if I wrote it down in this class. Nope. I wrote it down in a different passage, but we're just going to go ahead and look at that passage. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 1, and I love this. And we will get into it here in a second. The book of Revelation, chapter 1. Let's see. Okay, I'll just start with verse, let me mark this down. I didn't have it marked down, but let me go ahead and mark it down. I have it further down in my notes. Okay, I'll start with, it's further down. I'll go ahead and read it early. It's further down in my notes. I'll go ahead and just read Revelation chapter 1. Let's start with verse 10. This is John the Apostle speaking when he's on the Isle of Patmos. He says, I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet, saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. What thou seest, write in a book and give to the churches. Okay? He hears a voice speaking behind him. And that's always the way it is. Our hearts are naturally directed one way, and yet the Spirit of the Lord is continually preparing the ground of our heart so that we can hear the voice, and then continues preparing the ground of our heart so that we may turn to see the voice. Okay? To come from our understanding to the understanding of God, who is Christ himself, a person. Remember Paul, but we have the mind of Christ, a person. Okay? Let's see, what was it? Verse 12. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, and being turned, I saw, and I love this, 7 golden candlesticks. And then he goes on with a beautiful description of Christ. And then verse 17, let's see. Verse 13, and in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. He sees Christ himself, but he sees him in the midst. Not out somewhere, but he sees him in the midst. Okay? Now, as being the one in the midst, and I'm emphasizing this just because of the passage with the covenant between the pieces with Abram. Abram prepared the animals, and then Abram was off to the side. And it's the Lord who appeared walking in the midst. Okay? All right, now verse 17, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, and he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth. I am the living one. And was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and of death. And that is it. Right there. I was dead, but I'm alive forevermore. Okay, back with our notes. This all happens right there in the great tender mercy and ever-abounding grace of God. Abram is allowed to behold, not by his natural eye, but by the eye of faith, by the eye of the heart, by the eye of the understanding, beholding that which cannot be beheld, which cannot be seen with the natural eye or understood with the natural mind, but that which can only be seen if God reveals. That which can only be known if God makes known his knowledge. Okay? And I'm not playing with words here. It will always be that which is of man or that which is of God. If it was Abram's vision at that time, he never would have seen the Lord. If it was Abram's vision during that time, he never would have seen the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. He never would have seen Christ and him crucified right there if it was Abram's vision. But it was God's vision being revealed unto Abram. Therefore, it remains God's vision. It remains God's knowledge. It remains God's understanding. It is his. Therefore, Abram cannot boast in anything. He can only make his boast in the Lord for being so merciful unto him. All right, let's go on a little further. So we were looking at the term heifer, and once again, with all those terms, heifer, she-goat, ram, turtle dove, young pigeon, this is the very first mention of those terms in the Scripture that we find, which is very significant because they are first mentioned here in the Scripture concerning the covenant of God securing all the promises that the Lord has made. Specifically, all the promises that the Lord has made concerning an inheritance, concerning an heir, concerning a seed. All the promises. Can you just see it? All the promises being confirmed, I can't say confirmed, maybe I can, I'm not sure, being secured in this covenant that the Lord himself cuts. And all his promises revolve around an heir. Ultimately, that heir is Christ. Can you see it? All the promises revolve around the Son of God himself, receiving that inheritance that is given unto him of his Father. Okay? So just going on with looking at that term heifer, this is Nave's topical Bible, and I looked up the word heifer, and one of the little bullet points they have, they mention different things. When used as sacrifice, must be without blemish and not have come under the yoke. An atonement for murder. We read that one a couple classes ago, and last class from Deuteronomy. Actually, was it? Yeah. The red heifer used for water of separation. That's the one we read. Used for pooling. used for treading out wheat. And then it says this, tractable in Hosea 10:11. And then intractable in Hosea 4:16. And tractable, I had to look that word up. I'm not all that great, even in the English language. So I looked it up in the Webster's 1828 dictionary. And basically it says this, that may be easily led, taught, or managed, governable. And then they have Hosea 10:11 for that. Then intractable, Hosea 4:16, not to be governed or managed, stubborn, obstinate. And see, we immediately want to take, let's just look at those passages. Hosea, first one, Hosea chapter 10, verse 11. And Ephraim is as an heifer that is taught, and loveth to tread out the corn. But I passed over upon her fair neck. I will make Ephraim to ride, Judah shall plow, and Jacob shall break his clods. So right there, tractable. Maybe easily led, taught, manageable, governable. Okay? So that's one of them. The other verse in Hosea was Hosea chapter 4, verse 16. And it says this, for Israel slideth back as a backsliding heifer. Now the Lord will feed them as a lamb in a large place. And that's what they have here, intractable, not governed or easily managed, stubborn, obstinate. And we don't want to look at ourselves as being like that. We want to look at ourselves as being governable, like the Lord can govern us. Well, here's the situation. Until God the Father, in his tender mercy and ever-abounding grace, reveals his Son, then there's no hope for us to be governed of the true one who is present. Because we still believe that we are present. And if we are present, we are still in covenant with the inhabitants of the land, just like Abram. But see, remember, classes back, what are truly the inhabitants of the land? Well, for one, it's everything that shouldn't be there, everything that doesn't belong, everything, listen, that resists the true heir from coming into his inheritance. Now, for the born-again believer, because the land is the soul, what is it that resists that Christ may govern, rule, and reign in his inheritance? What is it? It is our ignorance, our imagination, our vain illusions, and our treasured illusions at that. It is our ignorance of the one who's present, because we still believe that we are present. And it all changes when the Father reveals his Son, when the Father makes known his Son. Then we know who is truly in the midst. Then we know who is it who truly lives. And it's not a matter that at that moment, at that day, we know, oh, I don't live. No, we know who lives. The contrast is made when he appears. If he is the one who lives, then everything else liveth not. It's automatic. Everything else, it's automatic. If he is the light, which he is, then everything else is darkness. If he is the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of God, then everything else is ignorance. But we don't know that until God the Father reveals him in the heart and in the soul. We truly don't know. We continue governed. We continue stubborn. We continue obstinate, not governable, because we're governed by something. Listen, we are governed by something that we believe to be present that is not. I'll give you a hint, or not a hint, but just an example. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, and they are out of Egypt, they've gone through the Red Sea, they're in the wilderness, they continue governed by a Pharaoh who is not present. They continue governed by Egypt that is not present. But who is the one who is present? The Lord was present the whole entire time. A cloud by day, a fire by night, the glory of the Lord present in the tabernacle. The Lord is present the whole entire time. The body, Israel, just is completely ignorant of the one who is present. Therefore, they continue governed by that which is not present. They continue governed by their own ignorance. Ignorance of the one who's present. Okay? We never want to be the bad guy, but God is not the bad guy. All right? All right. Just going on here. This is Wren's expository dictionary. Actually, when I looked up the word heifer, blemish came up, and that's how it the term blemish and the term heifer shows up in some of the definitions for blemish. So right here in Wren's expository dictionary for the word blemish, here's just a couple of excerpts, a little bit here and there. In Numbers 19:2 refers to a red heifer without blemish. There you go. As the required sin offering for the Israelite community. And then it says, as a literal sacrificial offering, the red heifer is designated in Genesis 15:9, Deuteronomy 21:3, and 1 Samuel 16:2. And then it says this, the Greek term for heifer, damales, and forgive me on my pronunciation, it says it occurs only once in the New Testament. And we looked at this verse, but it never caught my attention that it only occurs once. Very important. Only one time in the New Testament. In Hebrews 9:13, referring to the ritual offering of a heifer. And let's go ahead and look there. So Hebrews 9:13, and we've already read this passage in a previous class. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of an heifer, damales, with a D, damales, sprinkled the unclean, sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh, and it goes on, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. Your conscience. Your knowing. From dead works to serve the living God. There's only one who serves the living God. There's only one who truly serves the Father. Jesus said this, I always do those things that please the Father. No one else did. No one else does, and no one else will ever be able to. God the Father has one that pleases him. We are just ignorant of the one who pleases him. But it is God's pleasure to make him known in our heart and in our soul. All right? So, right there, that passage, the only time it's mentioned in the New Testament, and it brings Christ to the forefront. Right? Here in the Old Testament, the blood, bulls, goats, red ashes of a red heifer, all this stuff, to purge, sprinkling the unclean sanctifieth, the purifying of the flesh sanctifies that which is on the outside. And yet here's the greater sacrifice, the greater blood that all the other was just a testimony of, that testified of. Okay? This is Christ himself. Let's see. Okay, this is the IVP New Bible Dictionary for the term heifer. Now we're actually back to the term heifer. It says, mixed with water, the ashes of an unblemished red heifer burnt in its entirety outside the camp imparted Levitical purification. And I think we looked at it in a previous class to therefore let us go outside the camp bearing his reproach. Christ suffered outside the camp. And let me just look at that. Once again, mixed with water, the ashes of an unblemished red heifer burnt in its entirety outside the camp imparted Levitical purification. Outside the camp. Christ suffered outside the gate, outside of Jerusalem. All right, going on. This is the IVP Dictionary of New Testament Background. The other one was the IVP Dictionary of the Latter New Testament. This is the New Testament Background. And the term that it actually comes under is Apostolic Fathers. And under the 1.2.5 legal texts, that was the heading of the paragraph, there's this excerpt that I want to read. Taharat or Tohorot B and Tohorot B 4Q 276-277, forgive me, deal with the ritual preparation of the red heifer, the only means for purification from impurity of the dead, as stipulated by Numbers 19. The only means for purification from impurity of the dead, the red heifer. And yet Christ is the true sacrifice that when basically what they're saying right here is when a person would touch a dead corpse or would be defiled by the dead or would be contaminated by the dead or come in contact with the dead, they were defiled. And to purify them, to get rid of that defilement, to clean them, to wash them, they would basically use these ashes of the red heifer that were mixed with water, and they would clean them with that. And we covered this a couple classes ago. And then they would do that the third day, and then the seventh day they're clean. They would do it again the seventh day, and the seventh day they are clean. They are pronounced clean. Okay? Christ is our sanctification. He is our washing. He is, listen, the one, him who liveth, the one that liveth, him who liveth, is the one that has taken the condition of death away from the soul at the moment of new birth, where now the condition of life is present. Now, God the Father desires to make known the condition that is present. He can only do this by making known His Son who is present. That the soul may continue in the purpose for which it was created of God, the appearing of Christ. One of the results of that is this. The heart and soul of that person who is born again will now be governed by the life that is present and no longer governed by death, no longer governed by the vain imagination of death being present. And forgive me if I didn't say that correctly. The way it's on my heart. But this happens. I'll just read it again. The only means for purification from impurity of the dead. The thing is pure because the pureness of it, Christ is present. The one who is pure is present. Therefore, the thing is pure. Now, to get rid of all the thoughts, all the ignorance, all the illusions, all the imaginations, as the one who is present is made known. Okay? All right, I'll just go on a little bit. This is the IVP Dictionary of Biblical Imagery for the term heifer, and this is under the heading, the body of death, the section, the body of death. Also talking about the ashes of a red heifer plays an important role in purifying. And then later on, it says, a little further down, it just says this. It is an image that draws our attention to the boundary between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. Death is associated with the wilderness, the world outside the camp. Dead bodies are transported outside the camp. And what really got my attention here was this right here. It is an image that draws our attention to the boundary between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead. And see, here's the thing. At the moment of new birth, our souls have been translated out of the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of the Son of His love. At the moment of new birth, the eternal change comes to the soul. The eternal change is not I, but Christ who is present. Not everything else, but Christ who is present. No longer death, but the living one who is present. From one realm into another completely other, above realm, living, the land of the living. And the living one is Christ. Okay? That happens at the moment of new birth. Now, when does that truly govern? When is that truly made effectual in our heart and in our soul? When do we really, truly walk like it? I mean, I've heard this phrase. You know, can you talk? You can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? Well, no one. Everybody talks. No one can walk the walk at all. Christ alone can walk the walk. The thing is, we are just completely ignorant of the one who's present. Therefore, it appears as though he is nowhere to be found. But he is present. And see, just think of this. Think of this once again, Jesus Christ and him crucified, the death, burial, and resurrection. The Lord says, okay, prepare this. Take a heifer, take a she-goat, take a ram, take a turtle dove and a young pigeon. Take unto me these. So Abram, here goes Abram, preparing what the Lord requires. Cuts them in twain, places them one against the other, basically makes a road, a path. So now here you have the death. Then yes, I don't know exactly where, but you have the burial. And then Abram continues waiting, right? He does all that he does, and then he waits. He waits for the appearing of the Lord. He waits for the resurrection. He waits for the increase of the seed to appear. He waits for the true Son to appear. And he waits. And then the Lord himself appears in the midst. Christ himself appears in the midst as the living one. Just like, what was the passage that we looked at? Excuse me. It was Book of Revelation, chapter 1, verse 17. And when I saw him, not when I saw this, not when I saw that, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. The automatic result? Here's the living one. That means I'm not the living one. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, Fear not, I am the first and the last. I am he that liveth and was dead. And behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And have the keys of hell and death. And he appears in the midst of the pieces as the living one, as the resurrection. Earlier in verse 5 of Genesis 15, I think it was 5 and 6. Verse 5. And the Lord brought Abram forth abroad and said, Look now toward heaven and tell the stars if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be. Look, behold, the resurrection. See if you can put a number on the greatness, the fullness of Christ himself. So shall thy seed be. So shall the seed be. And this is verse 6. And Abram believed the Lord, and he counted it unto him for righteousness. But his believing the Lord came from his beholding the Son that would be, the Son of resurrection. And then here the Lord takes it a step further. Okay, now take me a heifer, a she-goat, a ram, a young pigeon, a turtle dove, a young pigeon. Whoops. I hit one of the mics. That's pretty loud. Sorry about that, guys. And so he prepares the sacrifice, basically, and the sacrifice is there. And it's dead. It's dead. Christ himself offered himself as the ultimate sacrifice, of which these animals testify. In that ultimate sacrifice, he brings everything unto death. This is what Paul says. Therefore we thus judge that if one died for all, then all were made to be dead. Then all died. And then Christ alone appears as the resurrection, the living one, and declares, Behold, I was dead and am alive forevermore. Abram was allowed of God. His heart was prepared of God to behold the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. To behold, listen, the living one, the only one who lives. Therefore, all this other does not govern anymore. Reality governs, truth governs, light governs, wisdom governs, understanding governs, knowledge governs, Christ governs. I like the way the Apostle Paul said it in Galatians, Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Okay, let's see. I know I'm getting close to time here. Still with the IVP Dictionary of Biblical Imagery, looking up the term heifer, under the subtitle Sprinkle, it says this, letter to the Hebrews shows how sprinkling as both consecration and cleansing has its fulfillment in Jesus Christ, the ultimate priest who became the ultimate blood sacrifice. And I love that. The ultimate priest who became the ultimate blood sacrifice. Let's see. Here's another good definition. This is the Holman Dictionary titles for the term heifer. The heifer was used as a symbol of the splendor of Egypt and of Babylon. And I'll just say this. Everything, the splendor of Egypt and of Babylon, remember at this juncture, we've looked at it with this particular cutting of the covenant, a covenant that is cut with blood, a blood covenant. Everything before now has no authority, has no sway, has no say in any matter whatsoever. So what about all those thoughts of Abram that continued of what was, listen, before? What about the time when he lived in Ur of the Chaldees, when he lived in Babylon? What of his thoughts of, oh, well, what about that? Or what about that? Or what if? What if I would have done this? Or what if I would have done that? Or why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I do that? Or even of his time in Egypt. Remember, the Lord didn't tell him to go to Egypt. Abram, man naturally gravitates to death. Man naturally gravitates to the abode of the dead. So here you have Abram. What about the time in Egypt? Why didn't I? Why did I? Why couldn't I? I should have. And here we go. The carnal mind, which is enmity with God. I could have, I would have, I should have. All that tries to continue to come and govern where it has no place to govern. The Lord brings that to an end in himself. There was a confession not of the Israelites, but of the Egyptians. Let me see if I can find it. With the death of the lamb, this was another sacrifice type of Christ. Here it is. Exodus chapter 12, verse 33. The Egyptians were urgent upon the people. This is after the Passover, after the lamb is slain and they eat the lamb. The Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, "We all dead. We be all dead men." But I read the words that are there. Everything else is in italics. Here are the words that are there. We all dead. When one died for all died. Okay? When this one is made known unto the heart, when this one is revealed unto the heart, as he is revealed here unto Abram, then that which governed before no longer governs. Everything brought to an end with the establishing of this covenant in the heart of Abram. And remember the phrase, Genesis 15:1, after these things, indicating that it was going a particular direction, and now, at this moment, at this juncture, it will go a completely other direction. What was governing before, that should not be governing, now no longer governs because of what is now beginning to govern in the heart of Abram. And every appearing of the Lord is like that. Every appearing of the Lord, of the increase of his government, there shall be no end. No end. Okay? But with his increase comes our decrease. And that's the order. If there is no increase, made known unto us, made known to our heart, then there is no decrease that comes of our own understanding, our own knowledge. And what is this increase that I'm talking about? Is Jesus going to get bigger? No, 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 no. He is great. Remember, what did the Lord brought Abram forth abroad and says, lift up thine eyes now, behold above. And he did not say, look at that star and see if you can find another one. No, he said, behold the increase of the seed, the fullness of the resurrection, the fullness. Abram just didn't know the fullness of the resurrection, the fullness of the promised one. Nor do we, my brother and sister. God declares the one who is present in the midst. Remember Isaiah, the heavenly declaration? Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth, not a little portion of the earth, or not a part of the earth. No, the whole earth is filled with His glory. That happens at the moment of new birth. And I think it's either Hosea or Amos, where it says, and the knowledge, now reality is present. The one who fills the whole entire earth is present. Who is the glory of God, Christ Himself, is present. Reality is present. Now, the knowledge of Him who is present must govern. And it's either Amos or Hosea that says, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord will cover, well, let's look it up, because I know I'll misquote it. Ha! I was totally wrong. Habakkuk. Forgive me on that. I'm glad I looked it up. And I love this little thing right here. It works great. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 14. For the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea completely, because the glory of the Lord fills the land, fills the earth completely. So that's what continues, I guess, to be lacking, is the knowledge of the Lord, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, to govern the land, to govern the heart, to govern the land. Let's see, I know I've gone over on time. Oh, I love this. I love this. I'll just read this last one and we'll be done right here. This is Ederman's dictionary for the term heifer. And let's see. Oh, I love this. A young cow, eglah, the Hebrew, forgive me for the pronunciation, especially one which has not produced offspring, one which has not had increase yet. Heifers were used for milk and apparently for plowing, and then heifers were occasionally used for special sacrifices. Okay, but listen to this. Especially one which has not produced offspring, one who has not brought forth increase yet. Don't back to Abram and the covenant between the pieces. Here is dividing them in the midst, facing each other, creating a path, making a way for the Lord. Here's Jesus of Nazareth, not having brought forth the increase of Himself in the cross, the ultimate sacrifice of blood. He offers Himself. He comes. He is crucified, dead, buried, and then His disciples, everyone is waiting. What are they waiting for? A teaching, a message, a doctrine? No. They're waiting for him. And he appears in increase. He appears glorified, the single seed glorified, having brought forth much fruit. The single seed glorified. He appears in their midst. And Abram, in the tender mercy and ever-bounding grace of God, is allowed to behold this one. One of the very last things that I wanted to read right here, it's still Ederman's dictionary with the term heifer. It says, some latter traditions hold that the Messiah will prepare the last of the red heifers, or otherwise emphasize an eschatological role for the sacrifice. The last, I love this, will prepare the last of the red heifers. The Messiah will do this. I love that. That's just a tradition. Some later traditions, yes, he became himself this offering. He became himself this very sacrifice. All the sum total of sacrifices before, he became, as we read, the ultimate sacrifice. That which all those spoke of before, he comes offering himself. So, what an awesome beholding of this one that Abram was allowed to behold. But why? Abram just continued in the purpose for which God created his soul, allowing the Lord to bring him unto the purpose for which God created his soul in the first place, the appearing of Christ. This thy seen me, and thy seen me hereafter. So, we'll let you go for this class, everyone. May we also ask the Lord to do whatever it takes, right? I mean, this natural realm is passing. It sure is. But that the Lord would draw our hearts, us who are born again. If you're not born again, you must be born again. And once being born again, for us who are born again, that the Lord would draw our hearts out of this natural realm in the sense of drawing the attention of our heart and placing it upon the one who's present, the realm of the living. From the realm of where death governed, our hearts abiding where our life is not found, our life who Christ is, unto our hearts and souls abiding where our life is found, Christ himself. So I'll let you all go with that. May the Lord just continue by his Spirit preparing the ground of our heart, that he would bring our heart in understanding, from our understanding unto his understanding, that we may behold the one in the midst. Amen? Amen. The Lord bless you all. We'll see you in our next class. Amen.